It all began when Sarah told me she was going out with her friends for a party. At first, I didn't think much of it. She had always been a social butterfly, constantly fluttering between events and get-togethers. But tonight felt different. There was an air of secrecy about her preparations. It wasn't obvious, but it was there. The way she took extra time to get dressed, the way she glanced at her phone every few seconds, as if there was something more important than me waiting for her. I didn't pay it much mind at first. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, trying to shake off the stress of a long workday. She came over to give me a kiss on the cheek before leaving, something she rarely did unless she was in a hurry. But this time, her kiss lingered. I could smell her perfume, sweet and overpowering, but there was something cold in her touch, like she was distancing herself from me. "Have fun," I told her casually, trying to brush off the feeling that something was off. But as soon as she was out the door, I felt a sudden pang in my chest. It was nothing I could pinpoint, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I didn't know what it was yet, but I would soon find out. The next morning, Sarah came home looking disheveled, her hair slightly out of place, her makeup smeared like she had been in a rush. I was sitting in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee, when she walked in. "Hey," I said, my voice neutral, almost too neutral. I was trying not to let her see that I had been up most of the night, tossing and turning, unable to shake the feeling that something had gone down at that party. "Hey," she responded, a little too nonchalantly. She grabbed her phone off the counter and began scrolling through it without so much as a glance in my direction. Something about her behavior didn't sit right with me. I decided to push it, to act like everything was normal, but the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. "How was the party?" I asked casually, leaning back in my chair. "Good," she replied, distracted, tapping away on her phone. "You know, just the usual, some drinks, dancing, talking. Nothing special." I nodded, trying to gauge the tone of her response. But she was closed off, as if she didn't want me to know too much. Then, her phone buzzed on the counter. She grabbed it almost too quickly, but not before I saw the notification. A picture of her, laughing, in someone's arms. It was a candid shot from the party, but the angle, it was off. The way the guy's hand was on her waist, the way she was looking at him, laughing in a way that I hadn't seen in a long time. I knew that look, it was the look she had when we first met, when she was carefree and full of energy. But now, it felt wrong. I had to fight the urge to snatch the phone from her hands. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but the tone of my voice betrayed my growing suspicion. She glanced at the phone, the smallest flash of discomfort crossing her face before she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Just a friend," she said, brushing it off as if it was nothing. "You know how it is. People take pictures all the time at parties." "A friend?" I repeated, my voice barely audible. "A friend you've never mentioned before?" Her smile faltered for a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, come on. You're being paranoid. It's nothing." "Nothing?" I felt a surge of anger building, but I didn't want to confront her just yet. Not without more evidence. But I knew deep down that something wasn't right. Something had changed, and I wasn't going to let it slide. She continued to talk, her voice floating in the background as I fought with the storm of emotions rising within me. My heart raced with a mix of confusion, anger, and betrayal, but my mind remained focused. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I had to find out more. That afternoon, I made a decision that would alter the course of everything. I hired a private investigator. His name was Mark, and I had known him through a business connection a while back. I'd always dismissed the idea of needing a PI, but I needed answers. I needed the truth. Mark didn't ask questions, didn't need explanations. Within a couple of days, he had surveillance footage and photographs from the night of the party. I stared at the images, my heart sinking with every frame. Sarah wasn't just laughing in someone's arms, she was kissing him. She was kissing him like she had never kissed me before. The look in her eyes was one I hadn't seen in years, passionate, almost desperate. I felt sick to my stomach. But that was just the beginning. As the photos continued to roll in, I saw something that completely shattered me. The man she was with was someone I had once considered a friend. And as the pieces began to fall into place, I realized that the betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional, and it cut deeper than I ever could have imagined. I sat there, frozen, staring at the photos. Each one felt like a punch to the gut. I could barely breathe as I clicked through the images again. There she was, my wife, Sarah, in someone else's arms. It wasn't just a friendly kiss. It wasn't just an innocent touch. This was something else entirely, something intimate, something secret. I felt my blood boil with anger, and a sickening wave of betrayal swept over me. But it wasn't just the kiss that hit me the hardest. It was the fact that the man she was with was none other than Jake, a guy I'd called a friend for years. We'd shared laughs, had drinks together, even talked about family stuff, and now I was looking at him kissing my wife, as if he had every right to do so. The anger boiled over, and I slammed my fist onto the table, making the coffee cup rattle in its saucer. This couldn't be happening. It just couldn't. My hands shook as I reached for my phone and dialed Mark, the private investigator. He answered after the second ring. "Mark, I need to know everything," I demanded, my voice tight and strained. "Got the pictures?" "This is what I've got so far," Mark said, his voice calm but matter-of-fact. "Sarah and Jake, no doubt about it, they'd been seeing each other for a while. This wasn't a one-time thing." My stomach churned. A while? The betrayal was more than just the kiss. This was an affair. A full-blown affair. It wasn't just a mistake, or a slip-up, or a one-night thing. It was something they'd been hiding, something that had been building up behind my back, while I had been none the wiser. It was a slap in the face, and it was only getting worse. "I need to know more. I want to know everything about their movements, their messages, everything. I need hard proof," I said, my voice shaking with anger. Mark paused for a moment, probably thinking about the request. "You got it," he replied. "But I gotta warn you, some things might be harder to swallow than what you already know. You sure you're ready for that?" I didn't answer right away. Could I handle more? The truth seemed like a knife twisting deeper with each passing second. But the answer was simple. I needed to know. "Yes," I said firmly. "Give me everything." As the days went by, I waited for the next update. Each time my phone rang, my heart skipped a beat, but when I saw it was Mark's number, a feeling of dread settled in my stomach. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. I was past the point of pretending everything was okay. Finally, on the fourth day, I received the next set of images. These were even more damning. Jake and Sarah had been meeting in secret. They weren't just going to parties together. No, they were sneaking around, spending nights together. The photos showed them entering and leaving hotels, and the timestamps confirmed it. This wasn't just a one-time kiss at a party. It was a full-on affair that had been going on for months. My stomach flipped as I looked at the hotel photos. There they were, clearly sneaking in and out of rooms, looking over their shoulders as if they were hiding from the world. My wife, the woman I had married, had been cheating on me for months, and I had no idea. I felt a dark rage bubble up inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. It was all lies. Every excuse, "I'm working late," or "I'm out with the girls," was just another lie. She had been lying to me for so long that I didn't even recognize her anymore. The woman I thought I knew was a stranger, a liar. But it wasn't just the fact that Sarah had betrayed me with Jake. It was the fact that she had been lying to my face every day. It was the deceit that stung the most. I had been a fool. A damn fool. The man I had been a friend to had been in my house, laughing with me, eating dinner at my table, while all along he was planning to take my wife from me. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was deep. It went beyond my relationship with Sarah. It shattered every ounce of trust one had in people. It made me question everything. That night, as I lay in bed, I tried to calm myself. I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were racing. I kept replaying the images in my head. The kiss, the hotel rooms, the lies. I couldn't stop seeing Sarah's face, that same smile she gave me every day, now tainted by everything I had uncovered. I kept thinking back to the moments before this had all happened, the moments when I had been too trusting, when I had believed that everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. It never had been. I heard Sarah move around in the bathroom, getting ready for bed. She didn't even look at me when she came out, as if nothing had changed. She climbed into bed next to me, sliding under the covers like everything was normal. I wanted to scream at her, to confront her with everything I knew, but I stayed quiet. I couldn't even look at her without feeling a mixture of disgust and anger. She rolled over and wrapped her arm around me, as if we were still the same couple, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I had seen the truth. And now, I had to figure out what to do with it. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the ache in my chest. I couldn't go on like this. Something had to change. The air in the room felt suffocating as Sarah sat across from me at the kitchen table, her coffee cup trembling slightly in her hands. I could see the unease in her eyes, the way she avoided looking directly at me. But I wasn't about to let her get away with this anymore. I wasn't going to allow her to keep hiding behind her lies, pretending that everything was fine when it was falling apart. I didn't waste any time. I had the evidence, and I was going to confront her with it. No more subtle hints. No more waiting. I had reached my limit. Sarah, I started, my voice low and steady, but with an undercurrent of anger that I couldn't fully suppress. I know about you and Jake. Her eyes widened for a brief moment, but she quickly masked the surprise with a fake smile. What are you talking about, Mike? She asked, her voice dripping with innocence, the same tone she had used when she lied to me before. It was almost too easy for her. I slid the stack of photos across the table. Her eyes fell on the images, and I saw the color drain from her face. She tried to keep her composure, but it was clear she was rattled. I had caught her in the act, and she knew there was no way out now. You think I'm stupid? I asked, my voice rising with frustration. You think I wouldn't notice? I've seen the photos, Sarah. I've seen you with him, sneaking around behind my back. What, you thought I wouldn't find out? She stared at the photos for a moment longer, then let out a sigh, as if I was the one who had done something wrong. She placed the photos back on the table and met my gaze, her face hardening. Mike, you're overreacting. It's not what you think, she said, her voice suddenly cold. Jake and I, we were just close friends. That kiss, it was nothing. It was a mistake. You know that. My heart skipped a beat at her words. A mistake? Was she serious? I had the evidence in front of me, and she still tried to downplay it like it was nothing. The anger inside me intensified, and I clenched my fists, trying to keep myself from snapping. A mistake? I repeated, almost laughing through my pain. You're telling me that a kiss, followed by countless nights at hotels, sneaking around behind my back, is just a mistake? No, Sarah. That's not a mistake. That's an affair. And I know it's been going on for months. You've been lying to me for months, pretending like everything was fine, and I was too stupid to see it. She flinched slightly at the truth in my words, but she quickly recovered, her eyes narrowing with a look I had never seen before. It was a mixture of frustration and defiance, like she was ready to fight back. You don't understand, Mike, she said, her tone sharp and defensive. You don't get it. I've been miserable. You've changed. You don't pay attention to me anymore. You never listen. And then there was Jake, who actually cared about me. He was there for me when you weren't. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. Miserable? I had been nothing but patient with her. I had worked hard to provide for us, to keep things stable, and she was blaming me for this. She was blaming me for her infidelity. It was unreal. My mind raced, trying to process everything she was saying, but it was clear that nothing would justify what she had done. No, Sarah, I said through gritted teeth. You don't get to blame me for this. You don't get to turn this around on me. What you did was a choice. And you chose to cheat on me. You chose to betray my trust. And you've been lying to my face the whole time. Her expression shifted, a mix of guilt and anger flickering across her face. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mike. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice faltering for the first time. But I couldn't keep living like this. You were never there for me. I needed someone who understood me, who made me feel like I mattered. I felt like I was suffocating. The weight of her words pressed down on me, but I knew one thing for sure: she was still lying. She was trying to make herself the victim here, trying to justify everything she had done. But I wasn't buying it anymore. You couldn't keep living like this? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. You couldn't keep living with the man you promised to love, the man who gave you everything, the man who trusted you? And now you want me to feel sorry for you? Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe? But then it was gone, replaced by something colder, more calculating. I never asked you to feel sorry for me, Mike, she said, her voice turning icy once again. I just want you to understand. Jake and I, we have something special. Something you could never give me. The finality in her voice was like a slap in the face. Something special? Was that how she saw it? She had thrown away everything we had built, everything we had worked for some affair with Jake. And now she was telling me that I wasn't enough? I could feel my blood pressure rise, my chest tightening with the weight of it all. I had trusted her, I had loved her, and she had just shattered it all with her lies. Get out, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but the words felt like they had been ripped from my soul. Just get out. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something resembling fear in her gaze. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by her usual indifference. Fine, Mike, she said, standing up from the table, her voice dripping with disdain. I'm done. I don't need this. I don't need you. I watched her walk away, and I felt a mix of relief and devastation. She was gone, but I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. The end of our marriage wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was realizing that everything I had believed in, everything I had thought was true, was a lie. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the door Sarah had just walked through, my mind reeling. The words she had said kept echoing in my ears, a constant reminder of the betrayal. Jake and I have something special. The phrase kept repeating, like a haunting mantra, and each time it felt like a blade being twisted deeper into my chest. It wasn't the first time we'd had problems, but it was the first time I'd felt so completely betrayed. She had always been distant lately, but I chalked it up to stress at work, or maybe a rough patch. We all go through them, right? But I had been wrong. So wrong. The signs were all there, but I had been blind, too consumed with my own life, my own work, to see what was right in front of me. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to calm the storm of emotions threatening to overtake me. Anger, hurt, confusion. All these feelings mixed into one overwhelming tide, and I couldn't find a way to stop it. I felt like a fool. A complete fool. I walked over to the couch and collapsed into it, staring at the ceiling. The weight of the betrayal pressed down on me, and for a moment, I couldn't even breathe. Sarah had been my everything, my partner. We had built a life together, or so I thought. Now, I felt like a stranger in my own home. The place that was once a sanctuary now felt like a prison. I thought about everything we had shared, the late-night talks, the trips, the quiet moments that I believed were real. But they had all been a lie. She had been playing a part, pretending, while carrying on behind my back. I couldn't believe it. There was a gnawing feeling in my stomach, a hollow emptiness that seemed to grow with each passing second. I didn't know what to do with myself. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and let this consume me. I grabbed my phone, hoping to reach out to someone, anyone, who could make sense of this. My hands shook as I scrolled through the contacts, but who was left to turn to? My friends? They had seen us as the perfect couple, always the ones everyone looked up to. Who would believe me now? My family? I didn't want them to see me as weak. I didn't want anyone to pity me. And then there was Jake. I knew I would have to face him. The man who had seduced my wife, who had made her feel something I never could. The thought of confronting him made my blood boil, but I knew it was inevitable. I couldn't just let him walk away unscathed. Not after everything. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. I froze, my heart racing. I wasn't ready to face anyone, especially not Sarah. But I had no choice. The door opened slowly, and there she was, standing in the doorway, looking like she hadn't just ripped my heart out. Her eyes were cold, calculating. No remorse. No apology. "You wanted me to leave, Mike," she said, her voice a strange mix of defiance and something else I couldn't quite place. "Well, I'm gone. What more do you want from me?" I stood up, my anger rising once more. "You're right. I wanted you to leave. But you're not getting away that easily. We need to talk about what happened. About what you did to me." Her lips curled into a smirk, and I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. How could she be so cold? So heartless? "Talk?" she scoffed. "What's there to talk about? I did what I had to do. I'm not the one who's been ignoring my wife for months. I'm not the one who's been too busy for anything but work. You were always too focused on your job, your friends, your life. What was I supposed to do? Wait around forever? Find someone else who actually cared?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was blaming me? She was still trying to make it seem like this was all my fault? After everything she had done, she had the audacity to sit there and act like the victim? "No, Sarah," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You don't get to turn this around on me. You made a choice. You chose to betray me. You chose to lie. You chose to cheat. And now you're going to pay the price for it." Her smirk faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "You're pathetic," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You've always been pathetic. I should have never married you in the first place. Maybe I'll just go live with Jake. He's the one who actually gets me." The words stung, but I refused to let her see how deeply they cut. "If you think that's going to make things better for you, go ahead. But don't expect me to be the one to fix your mistakes. You made your bed, Sarah. Now lie in it." She narrowed her eyes, her face flushing with anger. "Fine," she spat. "I'm done. I don't need you. I don't need any of this. You'll regret pushing me away, Mike. You'll regret it when you realize that you've lost everything." With those final words, she turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. And I was left standing there, numb. Empty. I couldn't even process what had just happened. Was this really the end? Was I really supposed to accept this as my new reality? I felt like I was suffocating, like the walls were closing in around me. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? How had she gone from being the woman I loved to this cold, heartless stranger? But deep down, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of something bigger. Something that would change everything. I don't know how long I sat there after Sarah stormed out, the empty silence of the house pressing down on me. The feeling of betrayal was still so fresh, so raw. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But I couldn't. I had to remain calm, had to keep control. If I lost that, I would lose myself too. The phone buzzed in my hand, and I glanced at the screen. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. "We need to talk. Meet me at the bar. Jake's here." The message sent a shiver down my spine. It was him. Jake. The man who had stolen my wife from me. The man who had made a mockery of everything I thought we had. My first instinct was to ignore it, to forget about Jake entirely. But deep down, I knew I had to face him. I had to hear the words from his mouth. I had to know what kind of man would betray a friend like this. I grabbed my jacket and slammed the door behind me. The walk to the bar was a blur, my thoughts a chaotic mess. I didn't know what I was going to say to him, or what I expected to hear. But I had to confront him. He deserved to be confronted. Sarah had blamed everything on me, Now it was time for Jake to take responsibility. I pushed open the door to the bar, and the noise of chatter and clinking glasses hit me like a wave. There, sitting in the back booth, was Jake. He was leaning back in his chair, casually sipping his drink, like nothing was wrong. He didn't even look up when I approached. "You got some nerve, man," I said, my voice low and steady, though I could feel the anger boiling beneath the surface. Jake finally looked up, a smirk creeping across his face as if he already knew what was coming. "Mike," he said coolly, "I was wondering when you were going to show up." I sat down across from him, my fists clenched at my sides. I wanted to hit him, to hurt him the way he had hurt me. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. Not really. "You think this is a joke?" I growled. "You think it's funny to sleep with my wife? To destroy everything we had?" Jake's expression didn't change. "She's not your wife anymore, Mike. She's with me now. You saw that for yourself, didn't you? She was done with you long before she ever met me." The words cut deep, deeper than I expected. I could feel my pulse racing, the room spinning with rage. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't know what she's become?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You've been lying to me for months, pretending to be my friend while screwing my wife behind my back. You're pathetic." Jake didn't flinch. He just shrugged. "You should have seen it coming, Mike. I don't know what you thought you had, but you didn't see her for who she really was. She's always been like this. You were just too blind to notice." I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the overwhelming surge of betrayal crashing down on me. "And what about you? You think you're some kind of hero, some kind of knight in shining armor? You're just as disgusting as she is. You both played me for a fool." Jake's smirk faltered for a second, but he quickly regained his cocky composure. "Look, Mike, I'm not the bad guy here. You weren't giving her what she needed. I was. That's all there is to it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The arrogance, the complete lack of remorse. It was infuriating. "You think you're better than me? You think you deserve her?" I spat. "You're nothing. Just a cheap, selfish coward who couldn't find his own woman, so you went after mine." Jake's face twisted with a mix of frustration and amusement. "You don't get it, do you? She doesn't care about you anymore. She never did. All you did was provide for her, keep her comfortable. But I gave her excitement. I gave her what you never could. That's why she left you. That's why she's with me now." The words hit me like a slap in the face. I could feel my hands shaking, my mind racing. Was he right? Had I really failed her that badly? Had I been so wrapped up in work, in everything else, that I had let her slip away without even noticing? I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "I'm done with this. I'm done with both of you." Jake leaned back, the same smug look on his face. "Yeah, sure. But it doesn't change anything. She's mine now, Mike. And you're just a sad memory." I walked out of the bar, the door slamming shut behind me. I couldn't get out fast enough. The anger was overwhelming, but it was also mixed with something else, something that felt like defeat. Jake was right in some ways. I had been so focused on everything else that I had missed the warning signs. But no matter what, I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't let this go on. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them ruin everything. As I stepped out into the cold night air, I realized that this was only the beginning. There was still so much to figure out, so much to process. But I wasn't going to let this destroy me. Not yet. Not ever. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind was racing 1,000 miles per hour, every thought a chaotic whirlpool pulling me deeper. I kept seeing Sarah's face, her cold, indifferent expression as I confronted her, and Jake's smug smirk in that bar. The two of them, together. Betraying me. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on my chest, making it harder to breathe. How had I not seen it? How had I missed all the signs? The next morning, I barely moved from the couch. I didn't eat, didn't shower. I just sat there, trying to piece together everything that had happened, trying to understand how my life had turned into this twisted mess. Sarah's lies. Jake's betrayal. And worst of all, the feeling of being completely and utterly blindsided. It wasn't like I hadn't tried. I had been a good husband. I had given Sarah everything she could have possibly wanted. I had worked long hours to give her a comfortable life, to keep her happy. But somewhere along the way, I'd lost her. And I had no idea when it had happened. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the messages from Sarah. She hadn't contacted me since the confrontation. She hadn't tried to explain herself, to apologize. She hadn't said a word. I felt a pang of anger in my chest, but it was quickly replaced by a deep sense of sadness. How could she do this to me? How could she betray me like this and just walk away? A message from my friend Mark flashed across the screen. "You okay, man? Been trying to reach you. You need to talk?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. "No. I'm not okay. But I don't want to talk about it. Not yet." I threw the phone down onto the coffee table, running my hands through my hair. The silence in the room was suffocating. Everything was suffocating. I hated feeling this way, hated the weakness that came with it. But there was no escaping it. I had been blindsided. I had been humiliated. Later that afternoon, I finally dragged myself out of the house. I needed to clear my head, to get out of that suffocating space. I wasn't ready to face Sarah, not yet. But I knew I couldn't stay locked up in my own mind forever. I needed to do something. I drove aimlessly for a while, not really caring where I was going. It was like I was on autopilot, going through the motions without any real direction. The streets were busy, people walking, cars passing by, all of them oblivious to the storm raging inside me. Eventually, I ended up at the same bar where I had confronted Jake the night before. The familiar hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, the low buzz of music, it was all the same. But nothing felt the same anymore. I sat down at the bar, ordering a whiskey, though I wasn't sure why. I wasn't in the mood for it. But it was something to do, something to occupy my mind for a moment. As I took a sip, my mind drifted back to that conversation with Jake. His words echoed in my head. "She doesn't care about you anymore." Maybe that was true. Maybe it had always been true. Maybe I was just too blind to see it. But it didn't change the fact that she had been my wife. And I had loved her. But what was love, if it was so easily thrown away? What was trust, if it could be shattered so easily? The bartender, who I recognized from past visits, gave me a sympathetic glance. "Tough day?" he asked quietly. I forced a smile. "You could say that." He didn't press. He just nodded and walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I hated feeling this way. I hated the weakness in my chest, the empty space where my self-worth used to be. But what could I do? What was the right move here? Should I try to salvage my marriage? Should I fight for her, even though she had already made her decision? Or was it time to cut my losses and walk away? As the night wore on, I stayed there, nursing my drink, lost in thought. I had no answers. I only had more questions. And with each passing hour, the weight of everything she had done, of everything I had failed to see, pressed down harder and harder on my shoulders. Eventually, I stood up, paid my tab, and left the bar. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face. I had no direction, no plan, no idea what came next. I was just lost. The next few days were a blur. The weight of everything was too much to carry, and yet I had no choice but to carry it. I'd avoided Sarah. I hadn't answered her calls. I hadn't responded to her messages. I just couldn't bring myself to face her. I wasn't sure I could handle hearing her lies again. I wasn't sure I could stomach more of her hollow explanations and empty apologies. The betrayal was too raw, too fresh. It wasn't until I got a message from Mark that I finally started to pull myself out of the fog. "Man, you need to meet up. I've got some stuff to tell you." I wasn't sure what he meant, but I knew I needed someone. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't involved, someone who could offer an outside perspective, And Mark, though blunt and sometimes a bit too direct, was always there when I needed him. So I agreed. We met up at a quiet diner on the edge of town, a place I hadn't been to in years. I arrived early, trying to steady myself before he got there. I didn't want to look like a mess. I didn't want to look weak. But the truth was, I was falling apart. I could feel the cracks in my facade widening with every passing second. When Mark walked in, I barely recognized him. He was dressed sharp, more polished than usual, but there was a look in his eyes that immediately caught my attention. He wasn't here just to talk, he had something on his mind. I could see it. "Let's get a booth," he said, nodding toward the back of the diner. "I don't want anyone overhearing this." We slid into a booth, and I waited for him to speak. He didn't waste time. "I've been talking to a private investigator," he said, his voice low. I blinked, the words not fully sinking in. "What?" "A private investigator," Mark repeated. "You're not the only one who's been asking questions about Sarah." I stared at him, confusion giving way to a rush of adrenaline. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" Mark leaned forward, his eyes scanning the room before he continued. "Jake, I've been doing some digging. I wanted to make sure you knew exactly what was going on." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. "What did you find?" Mark's face hardened. "I got the PI to look into Sarah and Jake. And I'll be damned if I didn't get some interesting information. There were photos taken at a hotel. You don't need to hear the details, but I think you can guess. They weren't just meeting up as friends." The air in the diner seemed to thicken, pressing down on me as I absorbed the weight of Mark's words. Photos. Evidence. Concrete proof. It was all coming together, and yet the realization didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made everything hurt even more. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. "So what do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What's the next step?" Mark sat back in his seat, clearly conflicted. "You can confront her again. You can't show her the proof. But man, I don't think it's going to make a difference. She's already shown who she is." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something across the diner, but I didn't. I just sat there, numb. The anger was there, bubbling under the surface, but it was like I had no energy to let it out. It was all so exhausting. I looked up at Mark, searching his eyes for answers. "What if I still love her? What if... I can't just walk away." Mark didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. "Then you're not being fair to yourself. She's already made her choice. She's already shown you where her heart lies. And man, you deserve better than that." His words cut deep, but they were true. I had to admit that. As much as I didn't want to, I had to accept it. The woman I had loved for so long had betrayed me, and no amount of love from my side was going to fix that. I let out a long, shaky breath. "I don't know if I can just let her go. I don't know if I can just walk away from everything we built." Mark nodded, understanding but firm. "It's not about walking away, it's about moving on. You're holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore. You're better than this. You don't need her." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that he didn't understand, that love wasn't that easy to just throw away. But in that moment deep down, I knew he was right. The trust, the love, it was gone. It was shattered beyond repair. I didn't know what my next steps were. I didn't know what I was supposed to do now. But for the first time in days, I felt a little bit of clarity. I had the proof. I had the knowledge. I wasn't walking in the dark anymore. And that, at least, was a start. I didn't waste any time after the conversation with Mark. I felt a rush of determination I hadn't felt in days, maybe even weeks. The haze of confusion and anger started to lift, replaced by a clear sense of what I needed to do next. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew it. There would be pain, a lot of it. But I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it was anything but. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. I looked different, not just in the tiredness etched into my face but in the way I carried myself. The weight of betrayal, of lies, had changed me. I no longer saw the man I used to be, the man who had been so certain about his marriage, about his life. I didn't recognize him anymore. But it didn't matter. I couldn't hold on to that version of myself. I couldn't let that false hope linger in the corners of my mind. It was time to confront Sarah once and for all. I grabbed my phone, ignoring the dozens of messages from her. The desperation in her texts was obvious, but I wasn't going to fall for it. Not this time. I dialed her number, watching the screen as it rang. She picked up after the second ring. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering my messages?" Her voice was high-pitched, frantic. She sounded like a child caught doing something wrong. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "We need to talk. Now." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her trying to think of an excuse, some way to smooth things over. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice soft now, almost pleading. "Why are you being like this?" I couldn't believe how easily she shifted into her role as the victim. She wasn't sorry, not in the least. She wasn't even remorseful for the damage she had caused. She was just trying to avoid the inevitable, trying to buy more time, trying to manipulate me into forgiving her. "No more lies, Sarah," I said, my voice low but firm. "I know everything. I know about Jake. The hotel. The photos. It's all out in the open now." There was silence. Then, her voice, sharp, defensive, broke through. "You think you can control me? You think you have the power to dictate what happens between us? You don't. You never did." Her words hit me like a slap. It was like hearing her true feelings for the first time. All the years of pretending, all the smiles, all the I love yous, none of it meant a damn thing to her. "You've made your choices, Sarah," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "And I've made mine. Don't do this," she pleaded, her voice trembling for the first time. "Please, we can work this out. I'll fix it. I'll—" "No," I interrupted, cutting her off. "You had your chance. This isn't about fixing things. This is about accepting the reality of what you've done. And I'm done." I hung up the phone, and for a moment, I just stood there, staring at the blank screen. My heart was pounding in my chest. I felt a mix of relief and anger, a cocktail of emotions that I didn't know how to process. But I knew one thing for sure: I had made the right decision. It didn't take long for Sarah to show up at the house. She was frantic, desperate, her eyes wide with panic as she stood on the doorstep, hands trembling. I could tell she was trying to control the situation, trying to manipulate the conversation to her advantage. But I wasn't going to let her. "Please," she said, voice cracking as she stepped forward. "Let's talk. You can't just throw away everything we've built. We've been together for so long. Don't do this." I crossed my arms, standing firm in the doorway. "You threw it away, Sarah. You destroyed everything when you decided to betray me. I'm not the one making this choice. You are." Her face twisted with frustration. "You don't understand. I've been unhappy. I was lonely. Jake made me feel alive again. You didn't give me what I needed." Her words were the final insult. She didn't even try to hide the truth anymore. It wasn't about love, it was about her own selfish desires. She had used me as a stepping stone, a safety net, while she played out her fantasies with someone else. "You never cared about me," I said, my voice cold now, all the anger that had been bubbling inside finally spilling out. "You just used me. And now you're asking me to forgive you. That's not how it works." She stepped back, her expression faltering for the first time. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to leave," I said, my voice unwavering. "I want you to leave my life, Sarah. You've already taken enough." For a long moment, she stood there, frozen. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but I didn't care. Not anymore. The woman I thought I knew was gone. The woman standing before me now was a stranger. She finally turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I didn't watch her go. I didn't need to. And just like that, it was over. Conclusion. It's been a few months since that night. Things aren't perfect. They never will be. But I've learned something through all of this. It's easy to get lost in someone else's lies, to believe in something that isn't real because it's what you want to believe. But sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to face the truth and walk away. The pain of betrayal doesn't just disappear, but it fades. With time, you rebuild. You find yourself again. You discover the strength you never knew you had. And you realize that, no matter how hard it is, you deserve better than the lies you've been living in. If you're going through something like this, if you've been betrayed, hurt, broken, know this, you're not alone. It may feel impossible, but you'll get through it. You'll come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more whole than you ever were before. It's not about waiting for the other person to change. It's about changing for yourself. And in the end, that's all that matters.